hyped up about this. Welcome, everyone, to another Adventure Box podcast. My name is Zach Edwards, and I'm the CEO of Historical Conquest, those that are bringing you this podcast for your enjoyment and also learning. We want to make this fun. So between Historical Conquest, the game, through our curriculum, all the crafts that we have in our Adventure Box, and the podcast, membership to the Zogos gaming platform, you are getting so much out of this. I hope you're enjoying it. Please send me comments, send me questions. If you have any suggestions of how we can make this better, please do. We want your ideas as we do this. Okay, so let's move forward. Today we're going to be talking about the Constitution of the United States. This is really exciting. This is one of the most important documents in all of world history, because it's actually through this document that we actually have a lot of other constitutions that are written. This is how the U.S. government was created, how the federal government was given its powers, how the states were given their powers, how they organized everything. Now, we talked about how we actually structured it, but now we're going to go into the actual Constitution. And again, why it's so important. So welcome to these founding principles. Welcome to this birth of the nation. That's how we call it, birth of the nation. We have the textbook right here. This is great. This has everything you want to know about the birth of the nation. And the arguments that were in there, the debates. We're going to give both sides. We do not actually tell you what to believe or what to think. We just tell you how to think and what kind of things to think about when it comes to it, such as the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. We're going to go all through that. We actually have a chapter on that. We have a unit on, or I should say unit. We have a unit on the Constitution, First Amendment, Second Amendment, all the Bill of Rights. You're going to enjoy that because there's a lot of debate on what they actually mean. Now, there is a debate on, is the Constitution a living document, meaning it can change anytime, or be justified by the way we live today, or is it a rock-solid foundation of our country, and the Bill of Rights is what we can actually add on to if agreed by the mass majority of a constitutional convention, or mass vote in the legislature as well. So they actually have to have a large vote in order, I think it's 3/4, to be able to pass anything to the Bill of Rights. And so we're going to get into the Bill of Rights later on, but the Constitution, this is the most important thing that we can talk about in this whole series, especially if you're in the United States, because you actually learn about why this is so important. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about, what actually was inside the Constitution. Today, this is what we're talking about. How did the states ratify it in 1788, despite fierce debate between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? And who were the first states to join the Union? These are all things that we're going to be talking about. The fight over the Constitution wasn't just a legal debate. It was a battle of the very identity of the United States. Was this the U.S. government that was going to be too powerful? Or would it protect individual rights? How much states' rights would have it? So all the things we talked about on Monday is in the Constitution itself. So the U.S. Constitution was signed September 17th, 1787. Now, this was designed to replace the Articles of Confederation. It was weak. It could not govern the whole country. So whatever is written in the Articles of Confederation do not apply. That's something that you need to know. It does not apply to us now. It was completely scratched. It was done with when we created the U.S. Constitution. So if you ever want to do an argument that goes back to the Articles of Confederation, doesn't apply. Sorry, it doesn't. Okay, let's go into the very parts of the Constitution by, first bringing up the Constitution. There we go. That's that little document with little amounts of words. Actually, it's not a little document, and that is the Article 1. There are multiple articles in here. So let's go through the preamble. This section right here. Actually, I have a better picture of the preamble. Well, no, I don't. I have the most important part. This is the most important part of the Constitution. We the people. Not we the government. We the people of the United States. This was made very clear. that this government was not based on the government or bureaucrats or even elected people's voice. It was made by the people of the United States, the 13 colonies, which would soon become the 13 states, and then we become the 50 states. The preamble. These are the main goals of the preamble. And I should actually have it written out, but I don't. Look it up. It's everywhere. Go on the internet. It's everywhere. Okay, first, to form a more perfect union, not a perfect union, a more perfect union. Then what? Articles of Confederation, every other nation out there that has examples that applied that day, they wanted to create a more perfect union than anyone else, any of those other ones. They wanted to establish justice, domestic tranquility. What does that mean? No chaos. They wanted to find a way to make sure everyone can work together. The criminals can be tried and held responsible. All these things. Domestic tranquility, peace in the United States. They want to create a common defense. So even though there's 13 colonies, they didn't have 13 different militaries. During the Articles of Confederation, they had 13 different militias, states militias. They basically, under this, they created one military government. Now we have a bunch of different branches. The Navy takes care of the water. The Marines are basically, with the help of the Navy, come from land, or come from sea onto land to take over or to fight. You have the Army, who fights on the ground. You have the Air Force, which fights in the air. You have the Space Force, which could fight, and this is semi-new, fights in space. You have all these different common defenses, which is what the preamble actually talks about. It promotes general welfare. So for those that can take care of themselves and those that can't. Now, these days we find a lot of people that actually abuse that system, but that's because we, as people in the modern day, have basically screwed that up. So, can we fix it? Yes, we can. Should everyone be taken care of? No. Because then you wouldn't have a government, because you'd have no money for it, because no one would be making money. If everyone just lived off the government, it wouldn't work. A lot of other countries try it, and they do not the best at it. Okay. And it secures the liberties for future generations. Now, this did not actually have the Bill of Rights in it, which we will come to later on, but those are the real liberties, the individual liberties. But let's go back. This is the statement that's in the Constitution in order to show that we want to have liberties for individuals. Really fast, what was the Articles of Confederation? The Constitution Articles of Constitution. I misread my notes. The Articles of Constitution, basically it's all the different articles that were broken up to develop our country. So let's go through each of them. So it's divided up into 7 different articles, and this is basically how the federal government is set to work. Article 1 talks about the legislative branch. Legislative branch, we have the Congress, we have the House, we have the Senate. The House is based on population. The more population you have, the more representation you have in the House. The Senate, though, 2 senates for every state. 2 senators for every state. That's it. That's how easy it is. Those that had popular states had a lot more voice in the House, which is actually where all the bills that have to do with finances start. The Senate has equal representation for all states. Doesn't matter your size, doesn't matter your population. Alaska, if it was size and land, Alaska would have so much more. At the same time, it has no population. So, it's a little bit different. This is how we made the more perfect union. Okay. Article 2, the executive branch. This article created the president to enforce the laws that were passed by the legislature. So, legislative branch makes a law, the executive branch enforces it. The president is elected by an electoral college, not by popular vote. Though the electorals do not come out until after the popular vote. That's actually what creates the electorals who will represent you in Congress. Or sorry, in the convention. Conventions of, no, not conventions. I can't remember. Okay. It's the title of when the state delegates get together and elect the president. And they serve for 4 terms. The president does. and is considered the commander-in-chief of the military. Now, here's a really interesting story. My father was in the Coast Guard. Not as of now. When he started, he was part of the DoD, Department of Defense, the military. But then he was placed in Homeland Security later on. But when you actually take your oath as a soldier, as a general, as whatever in the military, you say one important thing, that you will not demean, you will not contradict, you will not go against the orders that you are given by your commanding officer, who is the commander-in-chief of the military. My dad is the greatest example of this. I had no clue what his political leanings were while he was in the military. He was very supportive of the president because the president was his commander-in-chief, and he took an oath that he was going to live that oath and be honorable to his commander-in-chief. He never spoke out about him. As soon as he retired, that oath was over and his mouth opened up. Holy cow! I could not imagine someone talking out more about people's rights and such. Whoa! And I praise him for it. He was such an example of a true military hero in so many different ways. And he was in the Coast Guard, so he didn't go to all these different places in the middle of war. Now, again, Coast Guard. I'm a military brat in the sense that I am a Coast Guard brat. My dad served very honorably, and he helped out the Navy, he helped out the Marines, he helped out the Air Force, he helped out the Army. He was there. Now, he was chief of, well, okay, not going to go too much into who he was, but he was in control of the Coast Guard and the staff that was there. And so he actually helped out. Oh, and that was just his final one. He did so many other jobs, including going to the Gulf War and teaching the Navy of how to do patrols like they do in the Coast Guard, because the Navy was not set for that, but they needed to patrol the Gulf. You know, the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf, depending on what side you're from. Yeah. Okay, ongoing. The third article, the judiciary branch. This set up the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. It ensured laws followed the Constitution. So if the legislature created a law that did not follow the Constitution, they were obligated, the judiciary branch was obligated to strike it down. So this resolved disputes among the legislature, checks and balances, but also between states, because states have this issue of always butting heads. They don't always agree. You have very progressive or liberal states, progressive states. They might butt heads with the liberal states, which might butt heads with the conservative states. So the Supreme Court is the one that's over the states. It's over the court hearings that are not the normal. So when they get to the Supreme Court sets the precedent, which basically means he sets laws for everything before it. So all the other states, all the other courts under it have to abide by the ruling that comes from the Supreme Court. They are obligated to listen to the Supreme Court and how they actually run it. Okay, Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7. I'm going to shorten these up for time. Number 4, relationship between states and the federal government. Again, Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. They both had a compromise and were able to talk about it. Now, the very extreme Anti-Federalists did not agree with the Constitution at first because they didn't have the Bill of Rights, so they stayed away from this. But this article, Article 4, allows you to understand the states and the federal government and how they work together. Article 5, how to amend or change the Constitution. The Bill of Rights. It was all under Article 5. Now, Article 6, the Supremacy Clause. The Constitution is the highest law of the land. Basically, that's what it states. The Constitution is the highest law of the lands. No state's law, no federal law, no federal non-law that a non-elected bureaucrat puts together can supersede the Constitution. This is Article 6. That's why that's so important. It has to be set in stone, which it is. Article 7, how the Constitution is ratified. Okay, ratification, it was done in the next 2 years, I think. They waited till basically the Bill of Rights was signed for the final ones to come on. So, and this is what we'll cover next week. Now, why was it revolutionary? Okay, why was the Constitution revolutionary? This was the first government in history built on separation of powers and checks and balances. First one. There was no monarch. There was no dictator. There was no anybody that had ultimate power. The president does not have ultimate power. Checks and balances from the legislature and the judiciary branch. The biggest flaw, okay, the Anti-Federalists would say it did not address the individual rights, which, if you know how long the Constitution is, you're not going to write a book, because the book would basically be all the rights of the people. Well, that's actually why, again, we keep mentioning it, the Bill of Rights was written later on. But at this time it was not, because this was trying to set up the government so that they could actually pass the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights could not come out before the Constitution was done. And if they were going to go after all the things that are in the Bill of Rights, of course, some of the Bill of Rights, we're talking about the first 10, but there's also a lot more that are afterwards. But just even to say that the first 10, it would take months afterwards because there was no compromise between those rights. So, that being said, it was signed September 17th, 1789? 1787. I said 19. 1787. Okay, now, it's passed. Does that mean it automatically goes into law? Nope, it doesn't. Once the Constitution was written, it wasn't automatically a law. It needed to be approved by 9 of the 13 states. I think I said last week it was 7 out of it's actually 9 of the 13 states. But this was not an easy fight. Again, like we talked about, you had the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. And we're going to go more into that actually next week. It's one of our chapters. These are some great debates. You got to read it. We have a whole section in here based on that, so you can actually see what they were fighting for. So let's go over a little bit of what the Federalists were going after. Now, the Federalists were very pro the Constitution because it just talked about the federal government and the strength of the federal government. These were people like Hamilton, Madison, and Jay. Now, Jay was actually I can't remember his first name yet, John Jay. He was actually the president of the Constitution the second year. So this is why the Federalists were this is what the Federalists stood for. The Federalists believed in a strong centralized government, that it was needed to keep the government, the nation, stable and secure. They argued that the Constitution had enough checks and balances to prevent tyranny. Okay, yes. But it was all on the shoulders of the federal government, not giving as much rights to the states or the Bill of Rights as well, because that was not written. They wrote the Federalist Papers. So if you want some really good information on how the Federalists believed, or how they believed the government should be run, read the Federalist Papers. It's a series of essays, basically, of why the Constitution should be adopted. They were basically promoting the Constitution, giving it out all over the colonies and saying, you got to ratify this, this is why. Now, the Anti-Federalists were against the Constitution in the sense that they wanted a Bill of Rights with it. They were not anti the Constitution. This is people like Patrick Henry. You know him from the American Revolution. George Mason. Now, the Anti-Federalists feared a new government, that it would be too powerful, just like Britain had been, over the colonies, or that they were over their own people. They did not want that. They wanted more protections for individual rights and demanded a Bill of Rights. Patrick Henry famously declared, the Constitution is a document of tyranny. Because at that point, it was. There was no Bill of Rights. It just talked about the federal government and the powers that the federal government had. Actually, interesting enough, it did not give the federal government rights. So it basically just said, this is how it's structured. So the rights, like the Bill of Rights, we're going to go more into this. This is not saying, oh, We're the federal government. We're so nice to you that we're going to give you these rights. No, 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 no. We're going to go over this, but this is basically a statement of these are natural born rights that belong to everyone, and the federal government cannot stomp on your rights. That's why the Bill of Rights, pushed by Patrick Henry, George Mason, and such, was so important. So this was the struggle. So the first state to ratify the Constitution, to sign the Constitution into law, Delaware, followed up by Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Okay, they were very federalist states, colonies, soon to be states. But bigger states like New York and Virginia were divided. James Madison promised to add a Bill of Rights. Now this is the compromise. They had 3 states that would sign on. Nobody else would sign on. It took Madison basically to promise, and how much is a promise going to stand up? It doesn't really stand up in court. Now, back then, actually, it did. If I say something verbal to you, and you say, oh, no, you didn't say that, well, it's because we have less honor, sorry to say it, less honor than they did back in 1787. If James Madison said, he promised there would be a Bill of Rights, even if it wasn't written down, his word was his bond. He had to do it. And people knew this. So this promise helped sway more votes. So the Constitution is ratified by June 21st, 1788. New Hampshire becomes the 9th state to officially accept the Constitution, officially. I've actually got a picture in here of all the states and when they actually signed it. So, 1788, Pennsylvania, after that promise, signed on. 1788, as I said, June, New York was not accepting it. They were still having issues at that point. Massachusetts, 1788, but February. So they did actually accept it. So you can go through this, see this picture from Georgia all the way up to Massachusetts and New Hampshire. June 21st, 1788. There you go. So New Hampshire, and this is right after that compromise. Thank you, James Madison, for making that promise and for people to actually believe him. So, ratification happened even without Virginia, July 26, 1788, only 5 days later. A month and 5 days later. So it took them a month and 5 days to actually accept it after it was already ratified. Rhode Island. Rhode Island is the one that everyone needs to see. 1790. It took them 2 years. 2 years to actually sign it. Well, actually, no, sorry. 3 years. Just under 3 years to sign it. Because they didn't actually want it until the Bill of Rights were written, right? Okay. So they were in this debate, and the Bill of Rights would later be written in 1791. So this is significant. The Constitution wasn't complete yet. It needed the Bill of Rights. We're not going to be talking about the Bill of Rights just yet. We're going to go over it really fast, but we're going to go over the main points of the Bill of Rights when we get there. Right now, what you need to know is that these are the states that basically would accept the Constitution in the line that they accepted them, based on the Federalist states signed first. The moderate states signed with the compromise, some James Madison. Finally, when New Hampshire signed on, it became a country. Those other 3 states didn't actually matter, but because they were fair with those states, they did not want to enter the Union unless all of them were accepting of it. All of them were happy. Now remember, Rhode Island didn't even come to the Constitutional Convention. So, their fault. They didn't represent themselves. They could have. Okay, so, Bill of Rights. I said I was going to go over the basics of it. The first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights are the regular Bill of Rights. They were the ones that were established. So This would create a huge debate, which actually took years for Congress to do it. So basically, 1787 is when the Constitution was written and signed. Did not pass until 1788, and then and that meant the government was in place. So now they could actually debate the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights. Why were these important? Okay, the things that were most important. Let's see. The first one, Britain. Britain could actually control the speech that the people had. Well, funny enough, they can still control the speech that their own people have. People go to jail for what they put on social media. If we did that in the United States, holy cow, like a fifth of our country would be in jail if they ran it like Great Britain did. So they did not want them to be able, the federal government to control the speech. This is why Patrick Henry and George Mason were so adamant about a Bill of Rights. How about religion? They left Europe because they did not want their religions to be dictated by their government. How about the press? Okay, so the press, these are all the First Amendment. Press, the government basically in the UK and Great Britain controlled the federal government, their government, sorry, controlled the press. They could stop them. A lot of the things that are written in the Bill of Rights are actually based on things that they see in Great Britain. It's also what they saw in France. France had its French Revolution just after us. And these were amendments that were seen at other foreign countries that they wanted to make sure that the people had. Okay, so what are the basic ones? The most important ones. I can't say most important ones, the very important ones. All of them have different levels depending on who you are of what's the most important. So in the original 10, freedom of speech, religion, press, that's the First Amendment. Rights to bear arms. Right for the people to actually have arms, have guns, to be able to protect themselves, not just from criminals, which is a major part of it, but also the federal government if it try to become too powerful. So, yes, you have the right to have guns. Now, some states like New York have a lot more rules on guns than Alaska does. Alaska, go for it. The federal government, though, has certain ones as well that says you can't have fully automatic weapons. You can't have a tank. Actually, there are some people that have tanks, but they're disarmed. Okay, so number 4, protection from unlawful searches. The government cannot search your property unless it has a warrant. If someone comes to your door, say, I'm a federal officer and I'm going to search your government, you can actually literally say, no, you can't go away. If they barge in, anything that is found inside your property without a warrant does not apply in any court. No court will allow it. They'll throw it out, even if it makes a criminal go free. Why is that? Because it was so important to have that right. Unlike Great Britain, that they could not take control of you and your personal belongings and such. You have rights, including if you are such a bad criminal, then a judge has to sign off on it, accepting that the federal officers can come into your property, or even state officers. So police officers, sheriffs, they too have to have a warrant. Okay, and that was actually that was the Fourth Amendment. Fifth and Sixth, fair trials and due process. Everyone has to have a fair trial. They have to have the ability to have it in front of a jury of their peers, not of the government, not of the judges, of their peers. And the peers are able to decide on that. And due process, which means you actually have a process to fulfill your trial. So quick and speedy as well. You cannot wait years to be able to have a trial. Unlike state of Missouri and one of the disputes I'm having with the Department of Labor, they took 5 years for my appeal to go through, and then they pushed it off for whoever knows how long. So I'm still waiting. 5 years. That in the federal government would not be allowed. Now this is not a court, so it actually does not apply, which is why they have their appeals as they have it set up. So, states' rights and limited federal powers. 10th Amendment. That's a very important one because it states out how much the rights of the states have and how to limit the federal powers. Very, very important. Again, the Constitution gave the structure. It did not actually give full-on rights, the the Bill of Rights gives us more of those rights. Again, we're going to go through these things afterwards. Anyways, one other thing to note, 1791, remember 1790 is when Rhode Island finally signed on. Vermont is added in 1791, Kentucky 1792, and Tennessee 1793, the first states to join this union. So I thought that was really interesting. So let's wrap this up. The Constitution is the fight for, and the fight for ratification, and the promise of the Bill of Rights shaped the United States into a democracy as we have it today. Without the Federalists' view and the anti-Federalist views, I think we talked about this more on Monday, we would not have these rights and a more perfect document, the Constitution, to be able to have this ability to have this back and forth debate between states and between different parties. But the Constitution is not yet in stone, or was not yet in stone. It has been amended 27 times and will likely evolve even more in the future. Because everything that we had back then, they did not exactly know what would be happening now, which is why we have the ability to amend through a constitutional Congress or a vast majority of the Senate and House. So it's been amended 27 times. It can be amended more. If we need to, we can come back to it. But all the states have to agree on this. You cannot do it without every single state. Excuse me. What do you think? Let me just ask you this. This is your active question. What do you think? What do you support, the Federalists or the Anti-Federalists? Where would you be? Let us know your thoughts. Send it in our social media. Put it in the comments below. Send me an email. I'd like to know where you stand. I will actually read it on the air, not with your name or with your name, depending on what. It'll only be first name. I never give last names because I want to give you credit for actually telling me what you think. So thank you so much for joining me on this great adventure through the Constitution's creation and its ratification. Be sure to tune in next week because this is when we actually go into the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and how the government is actually established. George Washington's election and the Bill of Rights. These are all very important things that we need to talk about because this, again, is the birth of our nation if you're in the United States. And if you're not in the United States, this is a great example to live by. Find things that we have flaws. If you think there's flaws in it, great, send me an email. I'd love to hear your points of how the government is flawed and how we can make it better. But again, if you stay quiet, nothing's going to happen. So just putting it out there. Tell me what you think. I'd love to hear about it. We will catch you next time. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.